Right. Oh no, don't worry. That's basically what this is today. This is gonna be general than a mug. So so one of the things that I was looking at in chapter 2 was the statement he made about relying on medical training from the pharmaceutical world, as opposed to continuously receiving training as a doctor. You know how most professions you have to keep going and get like a certain number of CEUs for different things, but how doctors are not forced to get continuous training, and that they're basically relying on the pharmaceutical companies, which are just throwing pills at people as opposed to really just treating the root causes. Do you think that's the reason why the pharmaceutical companies have become such big lobbyists as far as the government is concerned today?
Of course. I mean, it's like when I go to the doctor, and like, I mean, I was reluctant to get on high blood pressure pills, but I've probably been on them now for about 7 years. But I mean, the dosage is low, but they never offered like solutions to lower my blood pressure. And I also have high blood pressure, but I didn't want to take no I think they call it something, whatever, Stanton or something, but I didn't take it. I read it, I found out some things, and I just decided to just take fish oil pills, and that's been maintaining my cholesterol levels. I mean, I changed my diet too, like as I got older and more health conscious. And I went and got the interactive, the scale that connects to my phone, and it has some real unflattering words about my about my body. And I was like, wow. But as I'm getting older, you get more health conscious. But the pharmaceutical companies, it's like they dictate the direction. Like, I guess a lot of that came out with the Oxycontin and everything, and how those pharmaceutical companies, they was having like, they was going so far as to having like strippers at conferences and all this to get doctors to sell these products. And and it's crazy. And like you said, these doctors, they once they become doctors, I think they had their residencies and stuff, but they don't actually, they don't keep, you know what I mean? They don't keep, I guess, bettering their skill set. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know how they go about that. But they always just providing pills as opposed to providing prevention. You know what I mean? Something to stop it in its tracks. So,
well, prevention makes them lose money, though.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, ain't no money in the cure, right? Is that what they say? Ain't no money in the cure. Yeah. It's that's it. What's the problem with that? I was watching this one documentary on Netflix, and they was talking to these hospital workers, and it was like, I can't talk about this. Like, people like in the Cancer Society and all this stuff they do for cancer, but they don't want to really tell you what they do to prevent a lot of these cancers, because they'll lose all this funding for all this cancer research. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like they don't even know which way to go with it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is, because that new information is out there because new doctors are trained in things. And like, as somebody who's in the mental health field, like, we're required to have 10 CEUs a year. So otherwise we can't even apply to have, because we have to reapply to have our license renewed annually. And if we don't have our CEUs, we can't get it, because things are constantly developing. And I just think that it's crazy, because until this book, I never knew that doctors didn't have to do that. Like I just assumed it was standard practice because whenever I was in the classroom, we had to have so many CEUs. When I was a school counselor, we had to have so many CEUs. And now that I'm a therapist, we have to have so many as well. So I just assumed that, you know, the people who are permitted to administer drugs and cut you open would have to do the same thing. They don't.
Right. That's crazy. And, you know, when we were talking last week, when Monique was talking, I'm like, I don't need a doctor. I need to find someone that has an office that's a nurse practitioner, because apparently they know better and they know more than the doctors. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that they should be required to take continuing education classes. That's just, I don't know. For me, that just, I don't know if I want to make another appointment anywhere. It's like I could probably sit and do my own research and figure out how to treat myself based on what he's saying in his book, because this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. So, I mean, we raised, well, I say raised, my mom's uncle, so my great uncle, was born mentally challenged. And so whenever my grandmother passed in 96, he came to live with us. And at that point, he was already in his 70s. And he was supposed to have died by the time that he was like 8 or 9, the doctors have projected, just because of his mental incapacities. And he was born diabetic in 1928, you know, not a whole lot of technology. And throughout his entire lifetime, his stuff was always managed by his diet. He never took pills because he couldn't take them, and he wouldn't take them. Like whenever we tried to give him pills, he would throw up or he would gag or something else. And whenever we would try to give him medicine, he could get violent. And so he wouldn't take it. So literally he died at 86 or 87 and had never been on medication in his life. And he was born diabetic.
Wow.
So it is definitely possible to maintain it through diet. But like you said, the doctors ain't gonna tell you that because there ain't no money in it.
Right. Or through other natural herbs, because I suffered with like Alan was saying, I had high blood pressure and I just stopped taking my pills cold turkey because they make you go to the bathroom like 50 million times a day. Like they really do. Because they're diuretics.
Is that why I go to the bathroom so much?
Yes, that is exactly the reason why you go so much. So I just stopped taking them. And then I had really bad migraine headaches. They used to torture me. I used to end up in the ER at least twice a month on a morphine drip. But cannabis changed all of that for both situations. And the last time I went to the doctor, she was asking me about my blood pressure pills. And she was like, are you still taking such and such? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, where, you know, your blood pressure is normal. I said, I know. I said, it's the marijuana. So that was me finding my own remedy for both of those situations, because I don't have those terrible migraine headaches anymore either. And I, you know, one of the things he was saying in the book is that when he was quoting Hosea from the Bible, saying my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And I think that is very true, that we should be very active in finding ways to prevent our own ailments.
Right.
And I think us leaving it up to somebody that's supposed to be a professional, especially now with the knowledge that we have, that they don't even have to continually go to training. I think that with those of us in this group that are reading this book now, there's no excuse. Like, we going forward, we really have to be responsible for our own health and healing at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about this book. Like, I've actually enjoyed reading it so far.
Yeah. Remember, I'm always trying to get information. Like when he was, I mean, it's really about your diet. It's what you put in your body. You know, I never thought I never thought I would have problems with gluten. But like the more I'm reading and now I'm looking at other alternatives because like when I got this scale and a couple of my clients that's also going on diets and stuff, and he was saying like stay away from the starches and like the breads and the carbs. So I was like, well, what's the alternative? I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and now I'm looking at it. Ezekiel 4.9 bread and millet bread, things things I would never consider. But now I'm like, I'm willing. I'm willing to. I'm willing to do that for my health. I got 2 grandbabies. I want to be around for my grandbabies. So I'm like, I try it. I never thought that gluten pertained to me.
Thought that was a rich white folk problem.
Well, yeah, I'm like, oh, you gonna take gluten out of pancakes? What you gonna eat the pancake for? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the pancake? You know what I mean? So, but now I'm opening up to different things. So it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. Like, I never, I never had pork in my refrigerator when I was little, but I was sneaking eat it. And then when I got about 18, I stopped eating pork. But I was a raging alcoholic. And my ex-wife used to be like, for a cat that don't eat no pork, you drink an awful lot. You ain't got no discipline with this alcohol, So I finally get just change your lifestyle. It's not all and I was looking at all the pills I take a amlodipine for my high blood pressure, and I take hydrochlorothiazide, which is like a water pill. I take that. Everything else is like vitamins. Like, I got the B, vitamins, men health vitamins. But my kids was ribbing on me. They was like, you got a lot of pills, but I just get the vitamins because that way I ain't got to pay for them. I get them through my health, my medical insurance.
Right.
I ain't got to pay for them, but I got like four or 5 bottles on my dresser. My kids always be ribbing on me, like you looking like, I'm looking like their grandparents. And, when they come visit, they got their little thing with they, thing spread out for the week. And I'm like, man, I don't like taking. Yeah. So I'm trying to get off. I'm really trying to get off the blood pressure. If I can get off this blood pressure medication, I'll be all right. I'm still learning how I can really, really do it. So that's my thing. So this book is going.
Yeah, they make you pee like a racehorse. I can't.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Too many trips.
Yo, that's the work running through the airport having to pee. That's crazy.
This is like a personal experience.
Whoa, man, that's brutal.
It is bad, man. The other thing, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because I was about to just talk about how something else that stood out to me was I kept asking myself, like, when is enough enough? And I think that's kind of like the therapist coming out of me in that mental health standpoint, because I feel like everybody has their threshold. Like, we will feel ourselves getting sick, we'll feel the changes in our body, but at what point do you make the necessary changes to either slow the progress of those negative or adverse effects, or to try to reverse them? Like, what is your threshold? Like, when is your enough? Because like he starts chapter 2 out talking about, his aha moment, whenever he realized that he could actually reverse it, and how much he had to go through in order to deal with his psoriasis. And so I think it just kind of made me question, I guess, like, when is enough enough? And kind of thinking about like my dad, who he's diabetic for probably 15 years now, but I've, mentioned a few times how he's inconsistent in taking his medicine and still eating what he wants and still drinking. And it wasn't until he was hospitalized that he reached his enough is enough point. Like, whenever he completely, flipped his eating habits and completely quit drinking. And like, what can, I guess, we do to I guess identify and help people reconcile with making the changes earlier in our community, because it's almost like we talked about yesterday. It's almost like it's expected that we're going to have high blood pressure. It's expected we're going to have diabetes. And so we don't do enough preventative action to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I think it's all about education and starting young with the youth. For example, when I was the director of operations at Habitat, we started a youth program. And one of the things that they would learn about was eating healthy on a budget. Because one of the things we talk about scarcity is that you actually end up not eating healthy, because the foods that are bought are cheap and they're the ones that are processed, with the most sodium and things like that. So we had a whole program where we taught them how to, be able to eat healthy on the budget, which foods you could cook and put together that would be inexpensive, but would also be nutritious for them. And, not so much the junk and the things that are extremely high in sodium and the fructose and all of that. But I think we have to definitely start with our generation at a very, very young age, so that that's something they carry over into adulthood, and they've already made it a lifestyle by initially making it a habit starting out.
Yeah, it's hard to get my kids to, right now, they're at that age. My oldest son is 29, middle son 25, my youngest is 18. They always, and it's like, they call my son, my oldest called me, it's like, yo, I'm going to get some Krispy Kremes. I was like, yo, I got to get my bed. Yeah, give me a dozen, man. I'm gonna need that, because the closest Krispy Kremes where I'm at is about an hour away. So it's not like it's on a regular basis. So every once in a while you cheat with your diet, but you don't want to. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's rough. It's a tough assignment.
Yeah, I think it is. Like my daughter, she she loves vegetables. Don't put a hamburger in her face or she'll fight you. She doesn't like hot dogs, and she rarely ever really eats meat. And when she does, it's normally like fish or chicken. And I'm so grateful for that, because, some kids want McDonald's every single day. But she has, started out really well. The only thing that we struggle with is the water. She's getting better with drinking water. But yeah, the sometimes you mean well, and then you have other family members that give the kids whatever they want, which causes issues too, because they don't know any better. And I actually got into an argument with my dad about it, and we were talking about eating things that I don't eat, that he couldn't believe that I didn't eat, like pig ears and pig feet and oxtails and stuff like that. And I'm like, I've never wanted to eat it. To me, it's still on the list of slave foods. And I told him, and you wonder why your blood pressure is so high and why you're diabetic. It's because of your diet. There's this one restaurant near his house, this is a soul food restaurant, that he will literally go eat at every day. And then they have these big cups of lemonade that's really like a handful of sugar, basically. And I'm so serious. Like, the lemonade where you could take another cup and make another batch of lemonade, because there's so much sugar. It's so much sugar in it. And so we argue about these things, and he can't believe that Samiri is like the way that she is with the way that she eats. And I'm like, because you have to start early in molding, their eating habits. We should none of us should be eating the junk that we do. But some of us, as Jasmine, you were saying about your dad, the mindset is just, I'm gonna do whatever. I gotta die from something. But it's like, do you really want it to be food? Like try to make a different choice of what's gonna take you out of here. Honestly, because for some people it's too late. You talk about the threshold, some people die from cardiovascular disease and stuff like that because they think that, yeah, I'm just gonna continue to eat crazy and nothing's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a lot more complicated though than, like you said, it's when they talk about the Mediterranean diet and how it's a whole lifestyle. So it's not just the eating, it's the community support, it's the walking and biking instead of, we get in cars and we go everywhere. So I think it's that in this culture we don't have enough focus on overall health and well-being and what constitutes it, because you can get fatigued from doing anything, even if it's following a healthy diet, just like we saw with COVID, people get fatigued of doing a certain thing for so long and you want to kind of go left. But I think if you have more of a lifestyle where there are components that are constantly feeding into each other, then that's what really supports overall health, and not just focus on just one thing, even though I think the diet is probably the most important thing. I just think that overall, there's a lot that we have to look at changing, to increase our health. He talked about the emotional part too, how a lot of times we don't address the emotional traumas and things. And that's another thing that feeds into unhealthy eating and just not taking care of ourselves physically, I think too. When we don't feel good emotionally, it comes out in so many different ways that, I don't know, we just have a lot of work to do, in general, I think, when it comes to health.
Yeah, going back to the trauma, some other things I was reading about, that people hold on to trauma in their gut for some reason. That's literally where it is. So that's that affects those organs there. And that, yeah, he did focus on talking a lot about letting things like that go.
One count.
Right.
With that, he said he's turning red and
right,
his blood pressure is boiling.
The pastor,
that's crazy.
The pastor, right?
Yeah, yeah. He was like he was literally seeing him turn red. His blood pressure was going crazy. I was like, wow.
So that that's where a lot of that comes from, as well. And if you watch, for some reason, my 600-pound life is like a guilty pleasure. But the majority of the people on the show, they have some type of trauma that has caused them to emotionally eat. So that, that is a very, very real thing, a very real issue with a lot of people.
Yeah, because actually it's no different than, like you said, alcoholism. It's just that they choose to express it in a different way. A lot of it is trauma-based, why you turn to other substances or other things in order to, squelch those emotions that you don't want to feel, And I think I was watching it the other night too. And one woman, she talked about how she went from a food addiction to a drug addiction. And then when she addressed a drug addiction, she went back to her old friend food, so this cycle, because she never really got help, with the emotions. She just kept cycling in from one addiction to another. And it didn't really matter if it was drugs or food, all of it was killing her, But if we don't address those things, a lot of times we think we're over things. And like you said, we've just been holding on to the same old things for 30, 40, 50 years. And it's really just compounding itself. And we think we've dealt with it, but we still have all of that emotion underneath it, you know. So,
yeah, most definitely, because addiction is addiction.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. Addiction is addiction. It absolutely is.
I think that should be included as a part of people's health regimen, you know, with the diet, the exercise, and the support system through counseling. I think it takes all of that in order for people to live a healthy life.
Yeah, and I was thinking, you know, I think Jasmine, when you asked that threshold question, I just think it's different for, you know, it's different for everybody. You know, what's your threshold? Because for some people, I actually think, and I know this may sound weird, but some people I think actually kind of invite illness in, because in some ways you have to look at what benefits are there to being sick, because you know, we would look at it and say, well, there's no real benefit to being sick. I don't feel well. But some people, they're trying to get out of certain things in their life. You know, a sickness can be a reason, you know, or an excuse not to have to go to work, not to have to deal with certain things. And so when you talk about that threshold, maybe they get more attention because they're sick. You know, there's a lot of different things going on. I've noticed when I work with my patients, that you and I would think, oh, that's enough. That would be enough for me going to the hospital all the time. But it's just so different for different people, because for some people, they're getting something out of this too.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I do. I know a case like that, but I can't. It's a there's a actual term for it. People who enjoy being sick because they like being taken care of. I can't even remember.
There's like a Munchausen's, and there's a Munchausen's by proxy, you know, where you may get something out vicariously from like a child being sick as their caregiver, because then you're getting more of attention, you know, things. Those are those disorders. And then sometimes I think there's something that doesn't really reach the diagnosis of being a disorder, but that is going on psychologically in the background with people that I've noticed when I work with them a lot. That you know, because some of them are quick to like accept disability, like go on disability when clearly they could still. I'm like, no, you can still work. You know, you can still work from home. You can, you know, you're smart. You're computer literate. You can do these other things. And they're like, oh no, I don't want to have to go to work anymore. I don't have to deal with that stress anymore. You know, and they just kind of withdraw from life. So a lot of people don't continue to push through. You know, they will let, you know, like I said, there are some benefits to that come with it that we don't really ever talk about. You know, like I said, whether it's, oh, I don't have to go to work anymore, and I can get, you know, I can still get some type of support financially, and I don't have to deal with all of those stressors that I used to, or, you know, I don't have to deal with certain members of my family like I used to, or I get more sympathy than I used to. And so it's kind of, I think it's really like a complicated kind of soup when you start unpacking a lot of different people, and it may not rise to the level of being a disorder, but it's certainly there in the background somewhere.
Right. Because I know a couple of people that come to mind when we're talking about that issue. And it gets to be frustrating for people around them, because you just, you know, they're fully capable and you just don't want to deal with it anymore. It's like, okay.
Right. You know, you could do more. Right.
Right.
You could do more than you doing. Right. Because I push people, like I said, because me being a dialysis social worker, I push people to like get transplant. They'll drag their feet, you know, they'll come up with these excuses. And then sometimes I realize I wanted more for them than they wanted themselves. You know, like you can't, you know, and it doesn't work either.
What I was looking at when he talked about taking that food sensitivity test. Have any of you ever taken one?
I have not.
No.
I haven't either, but I thought about it too when Monique was talking, and from reading his book, how we don't look at that, and how like she was saying, something that may be not good for you may be okay for me. And maybe we need to start doing that. You know?
Yeah, I was thinking about actually scheduling one, because I'm pretty sure I have an inkling of an idea of one or two things, but I'm pretty sure there's probably a laundry list of stuff that I need to stay away from, and that should definitely be my starting point.
Well, how do you go about getting a food sensitivity test?
There are places you can go. Like all you really have to do is even Google it. I've even seen some on Groupon before, you know, where they've offered specials. Yeah, just the local labs do them. And to be honest, I started looking at it too, Yoshunda, this week. You know, I think there's a lab in Griffin that you can schedule and go and have a food allergy test done.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking.
Yep. Because I was thinking, what else we thought about this too, reading the book. I think one of you guys was saying that when I first got on is that we need to utilize other people, other professionals, instead of just looking to doctors, like you said, whether it be a nutritionist, go to someone that specializes in food allergies, but stop looking at just the doctors, because such a small part of their education is on nutrition, that they're not the folks we really need all the time, I think.
Right.
Well, I mean, he even talks about how disheartening it is that he says on page 18, as a medical doctor, I had been trained to address the symptoms, but after months and years of this, I really did feel like if I were going crazy. So basically, and he says on 19, treating the symptom is not the same as treating the root cause. So he acknowledges that they're trained to make you feel better, not to fix it.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Ain't no money in it.
Exactly.
It's like, I guess you want to keep your clientele, right? They like the total opposite of, you want them to keep coming back. It's like, I'm gonna need, so man, that's you would think it go against the oath they take almost, like, it's like, wow. I mean, they're not all like that. I mean, the general structure of it.
We got to keep in mind the oath is to do no harm. And as long as you're not doing anything that's going to exacerbate the sickness, and technically you're not. There's a loophole to everything.
Semantics is all you need in this.
Big loophole again. It's definitely a loophole. Wow.
But yeah, with the food sensitivity test, and he's talking about that he learned from firsthand experience that the root of the most common diseases is due to inflammation from the foods that we eat. And it could be the difference between life and death, health and constant sickness, and freedom and captivity, basically. And he was talking about people don't realize that with inflammation, it's doing a lot more damage, and it's almost the root cause of every chronic disease.
And I checked him on that too, y'all. I Googled it because I was like, this is a bull.
Yeah, he said 90% of cardiovascular diseases are caused by inflammation.
Yep.
But it's true though. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah.
I had never heard, and I was like, this is a really good pitch for a book. So I started researching. It's out there.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is.
And he listed it, chronic inflammation of the joints that causes arthritis, osteoarthritis, inflammation of the brain with dementia, Alzheimer's, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, inflammation of arteries causes most cardiovascular disease, inflammation of muscles with fibromyalgia, and inflammation of the skin causes eczema and psoriasis. And then that was the interesting thing for me when he touched on autism and talked about the patient that he had that was going to come in, and he didn't have an appointment until scheduled 2 months out, but he told the mother to change 2 things in the child's diet, and she said that the child had 50% improved by the time they came to the first doctor's appointment, just based on that, and not even the whole, diet that he was going to recommend. So I think that that's very telling.
So that's the one that kind of hung me up a little bit, just because like the facility that I run, we have a lot of autistic students. Like over half of my kids are on the spectrum. And I know that there are foods that limit their reactions. So like I want to give red dyes to kids at school, and we limit sugar intake and stuff like that, because that stuff does exacerbate their meltdowns and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily know that, I guess, and I'll have to wait till we get to that chapter, because I might be, misconstruing his words, but it almost sounds like he is proposing that there is a cure for autism. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. So, but I'll wait till we get to that chapter to discuss that, because that's why I didn't bring it up. Because I think I might be reading into it, and maybe he's just talking about kind of what I'm saying as far as like lessening the symptoms and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think he was talking about lessening the symptoms.
Yeah.
I don't think he was saying that there was a cure for it.
Yeah, that's the way I think it too. Like you said, maybe we'll say more, but I was thinking he was just saying that, sometimes if we do a better job at looking, at what the kids are taking into their diets too, then that might help with some of their behaviors. Because I thought about it too, Jasmine, because, I work in my full-time job as, consultant for kids with high-end mental health and behavioral issues, and how that's a component in foster care we really don't touch a lot. We're always talking about behavioral modifications and different therapies, but what they're eating, I'm sure varies, a great deal from placement to placement. And I don't think that's a component that we consistently track with children. It's just, are they getting a healthy, nutritious diet that is specifically good for that one child? And I was even wondering if like Medicaid even pays for kids to go to like nutritionists or have other consultations. That's what it made me think about when I was reading it, how that would be great if we kind of incorporated that into their care or their plan of care.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't, unless they have severe health issues.
You're right.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about that too, like what, because I was thinking about how they did the kids with ADHD, how they would just diagnose these kids and then, prescribe them these medications. And when we figured out that it was largely our community that was being affected, and a lot of times they just diagnosed the kids that way because they just felt like they couldn't be still or sit down, which is one of the reasons why I probably won't allow my daughter to attend public school at all until later on. But it shows that children from the age, I want to say the age of 3 up until 7, don't need to be in a structured learning environment, because it's very restrictive to their creativity. And it talks about how you can't expect them to sit still for long periods of time, because they just can't do it. Really, they're not meant to do it at that age. And I think that's where a lot of the children have been misdiagnosed over the years for that reason. But then also think about what that could mean when we're talking about the kids with autism. Is there something else that is being overlooked when we're talking about in relation to like the foods that they're eating and stuff like that? But I think it would be some really interesting research. Oh, and hey, Monique, just joining us. We were just talking about you earlier.
Hey everybody. Look, I'm gonna make it one day on time. Next week I am, because I don't have a room to moderate. But hey everybody.
Yeah, we were talking about the last discussion we had when you were talking about how the doctors don't have to do any continuing education like the nurses, and how talking about the food sensitivity testing and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All of those are like really I call them elephant in the rooms. People don't really want to address it. But it needs to be seen, even with the food sensitivities.
So yeah, we covered
yeah, if you could catch me up, if people don't mind, just give me like a 30-second.
Yeah, we covered those. We talked about the trauma in relation. What happens with a lot of our health is, the trauma that has not been diagnosed, or no one seeks therapy for. We also talked about inflammation being the main reason for all of these different chronic diseases based on the foods that we eat. What else? Oh yeah, we talked about the pharmaceutical companies, and that was pretty much it, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the author of this book is white, but when it comes to a lot of Black people, if you're in the United States, a lot of the inflammation stuff doesn't even stem from the food. It stems from epigenetics. You inherited your ancestors' stress, their trauma. It's embedded in your DNA. They actually do studies. DNA changes according to what people have been through. So a lot of times, even when our people think they're taking the healthy route and they're eating healthy and they're doing all those things, they'll still go to the doctor with health issues. And it's like, I'm doing everything right. Why do I still have these issues? And your DNA remembers when something happens, even if you've never experienced racism personally, because you have some Black people that say that. When you recognize it, that's why you'll see a lot of people who feel like they grew up a certain way, they were middle class, but if they look at the news, they're triggered by like a George Floyd story or whatever, because it's built into your DNA. So a lot of times when it comes to us as Black people, yes, you should eat healthy. Yes, you should know how your body reacts to certain food, because at this point in time, we're all kind of mixed with some everything. But you also have to put your mental health at the forefront, because that's really what kills a lot of us. Chronic functional stress, chronic functional trauma, not seeking help, because a lot of us are religion-based. We're not spiritually based, we're religion-based. And so people say, God got me, or they just throw everything on God, and they don't really treat, traumas, having to, face abusers by chance if they had an abuser in their family, having to accept your abuser that might come from slavery, because, a lot of us, our ancestors may have gotten beat and hung from trees, but your grandmama might also beat you too. And this just cycles. So a lot of that, yes, we do have to watch our food, but when it comes to Black people, we actually need to start with the root of mental patterns first before we get healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned a couple of times we were talking about before about Joy, the one, I think it's pronounced DeGroy, her last name, with the post-traumatic slave syndrome that she did the studies on, which you were talking about before, about the genetics, how it gets embedded in our DNA, even if we didn't have those experiences, but our ancestors did. So yeah, I think, mental health is definitely a huge proponent of everything as far as our health. A lot of times, like for me, I've had to disconnect a lot from the news. I don't even watch the news anymore. From social media at times, because people don't understand that a lot of things can be triggers. Even the most simple things. It could be words, it could be images, or whatever. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we're allowing ourselves to constantly be bombarded with these different types of, programming and messaging that can have an effect on our mental health as well.
It really does. And a lot of times for us as Black people, detrimental things to our health is wrapped up in empowerment. It's just my opinion. I don't even like to connect with Black girl magic. I hate when somebody calls me strong Black woman. Women empowerment. I just disassociate from that, because what that enforces is that you're willing to tolerate with everything, and you can take the weight and the burden of everything, and then you need to be celebrated because you can. And if one person says, I'm not doing that, that's bullshit, or I can't, then everybody goes, well, you must be lazy or something's wrong with you. And that only happens in our community. Like, you have to be this, walking, breathing, functional, unhealthy person. If that means you have to be a great mom, but you skip meals. That's why I say we have to start mental. A lot of us, is not about we're supposed to be vegan. Like, you need to get that out your head. A lot of it is you don't even eat appropriately. You work 12 hours,
right?
You eat one meal, and then you be like, as long as my kids eat, I ain't got to eat. That's a problem. You need to be eating. You need to not be skipping breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's not a badge of honor. And that should be an example for other women or your daughters, because they're going to grow up thinking, I can just grab something. I don't have to sit down. I don't have to chew and get pleasure and experience from chewing slowly and eating my food. You gulp your food down really fast. That's not good for your body. Digestion starts with your teeth and your chewing. It doesn't start in your belly. And when you're dumping whole food in your mouth because you're like, I gotta hurry up, or you don't eat at all, you're programming your all the way down to your smallest cell. You're programming your DNA to say, I just have to be in survival mode with the least nourishment, care, and love possible that I need. And even though I'm talking, you're talking, everybody is on this call, you are the past, present, and future. You are the ancestors to your future kids, the kids you have not even created that are in your ovaries. I don't know if a guy is on here, that's in your sperm. That DNA is being created according to what you're doing now. So you have already programmed your kids before you even created your kids. And whatever your mother and her mother and her mother and those ancestors, they're already in your DNA. And we have to stop saying things are empowerment. We have to stop saying that, oh, we have overcome, we can do this, because it's detrimental to our overall health beyond the physical, your mental, your emotional, financial. It impacts everything. So I love the information. This book is great, but it's written from a white person standpoint.
That's
so
very true.
Yeah, you can take the information, but that the author would never know what we actually need for our health, because our bodies respond differently to the food and the environment, and like you were saying, the images that are fed to us to make us quote unquote healthy.
The other thing, because you were talking about not eating, I see a lot of posts when women are like, as long as my kids have new clothes and new shoes, I'll walk around with a bonnet and and leggings. And I'm like, why, sis?
I know, like, just say, if you want to do that for you, just say that. Like, I tell people, I'm like, child, I put on leggings because that's what I want. But I ain't putting on leggings because I'm like, Madison got to get something before I do. But that's just not going to happen.
Right.
You're not gonna never hear me say, I go hungry so my child can eat. Unless we just poverty. I can take 3 ingredients to make a meal. You would never hear me say that. You would never hear me say, I'm gonna lose sleep for mine. The hell? Well, who gonna take care of it if I'm not here? We do that all the time, and we say women empowerment. We have these women empowerment programs. Church does it, everybody does it, and then you have an amen choir. People not realizing consciously you're agreeing with multiple people that it's okay for long suffering.
Right.
And then in the same breath, you go, we need assistance. That don't even go together. You have to admit that some things that have been wrapped up as this is good for you is harming us. Because think about it. I don't know, is it men on the call today?
Yes.
But it's mostly women, especially Black women. Think about it. I remember going in labor with my daughter. It was the day of our final. And I called my teacher to tell her I was in labor. And she was like, do you want me to bring you a computer? No. The fuck not. I'm not taking a final because this moment is the only moment that I can focus on myself and focus that my daughter is going to start off with her first breath and comfort and pleasure and being catered to. Meanwhile, every time I go online and I see my sisters celebrating a woman who was in labor, and she'll say, oh, I was a lawyer and I finished my final in the bed, or I was breastfeeding my baby and she's 20 minutes old, and everybody celebrate. I just click out. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. Because when her child and her should be receiving love and care and comfort and just accepting people catering to them, you're going, oh, no. I'm not worthy of all of that. I'm finna start my child off with, you don't come first. That I'm not planning that. I don't care if the world has to stop. That just wasn't gonna happen for me. And even my classmates now talk about that. They was like, we can't believe you told her she couldn't bring it. I wish you would have showed up at the hospital with a computer. I wish you would have showed up.
Like you said, that feeds into that idea that you have to do that. Because like I was listening to a thing on NPR the other day, and it's a businesswoman in Atlanta, and she was talking about how whenever they were getting started, how they got robbed at gunpoint one day, but because she was a small Black owned business, after they did the police report, they went ahead and made their delivery and finished working that day. And she says, I remember sitting in my bed that night after I had my shower and just collapsing and just crying. She said, but in the moment, even though I had literally just had a gun to my head, I went ahead and finished my work day because I knew that if I didn't, it would have been detrimental in the long term to my business. And we're not afforded the flexibility or the security to be able to call to say, you know what, I just had a gun at my head. I'm sorry, I can't deliver your cupcakes today. We don't have that ability.
Because to me, no diet will override that. There's no diet. There's no fresh vegetables, no fresh fruit. There's nothing that God has created or man has genetically modified for us to eat that will override that type of stress to your mind and your body. Because again, your programming, I'm supposed to endure. Your body actually, as Black people say pray over your food, but like when you study, people actually speak to their food and then give honor. It's really for you to give honor to your food, and your food goes in to do what it's supposed to do. But we just kind of vaguely go, God bless you for this food, blah blah blah. But it's really supposed to be like, I give honor. Like if it's meat, this animal sacrificed his life. I hope whatever's in this meat, when you go into my body, gives me the nutrients and everything that I need to withstand and heal and renew. We just kind of go, amen, praise God, and eat. But no matter if you have the healthiest diet, you cannot override that you were put at gunpoint, robbed, and then you had to continue working because what was more important to you was you didn't want the world to think that you were not a great business owner. When the world should have been saying, oh my God, we understand. You got robbed at gunpoint. Because if it was a white person, that's what would happen. Yeah. But in our community, it's like, you should have went on. Why didn't I get my cupcakes by 3 p.m.? It's 3:10. I don't care if it was gun to your head. Like, those are unrealistic things that we can't out-eat. You can't out-eat that. And I think, you know, men have that too. So I was just speaking from a woman point of view because, you know, I am a Black woman. So we usually have the weight of, you should be able to do everything and beyond and still be called strong. Versus our men, you just don't even get the benefit of the doubt. You just should be strong, and I don't want to hear nothing about it, because if I can't complain, then you definitely shouldn't be complaining, because you're the man and I'm the woman. You can't out-eat any of that. You can't take no supplements and outdo that. And that is something that we really have to start talking about when it comes to just our people.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You know, I had a friend of mine that she said she was suffering from clinical depression, and she's now a licensed clinical social worker and is working as a therapist. But she said she remembered a time in her life before she had gone to school that she was, you know, suffering from depression, you know, was trying to navigate life, motherhood, work, and all these things. But she was just crushed by these symptoms of depression that she was having. She went to the therapist, who was also, I think she said it was a Black female. And like you said, instead of supporting her through that, she said that the therapist told her, look, you are a Black woman. You do not have the luxury of being depressed. And you have children. You just need to snap out of this. Now, while she said it did have a kind of a triggering effect on her, it did kind of wake her up that she needed to actually move on some things and kind of move her way through. I just wonder how helpful that really was to her. She said it did kind of, you know, jolt her, you know, and make her realize that there were some things that she hadn't been able to pay attention to because of her depression. But like you said, again, I don't think that the root of it was ever treated. But it goes back to what you're saying, Monique, is that that's just something that we tend to do. We tend to tell women, like you said, we're just speaking for Black women right now, but that you have to be strong, you know, that being depressed is a luxury instead of a very real thing.
And you know, and it's not even considered luxury. Sometimes you're just lazy.
Yeah,
right.
You're lazy. You don't have
right.
no motivation. You know, put your big girl panties on. That's just life.
Yeah, she was telling her a luxury in terms of like you being, you know, like you could go and maybe go somewhere or escape. She was mentioning it. She was looking at it as a luxury, as you don't have time for the treatment and the luxury and the space to treat it as such. That's what she was telling her. Not that it was a luxury, but that the luxury of actually being treated and like you said, catered to in a sense of you have this illness. She was telling her, let's snap to it. You got to get back out there. You know, you're a Black woman. You know,
and as a result,
you don't have the time to do this.
And we have to think about, you know, what are the consequences for that, right? What are the outcomes? Because I know when I had just entered, you guys were talking about like, you know, ADHD and medicating our kids and school system and stuff, right? And, you know, when you're on the outside looking in, you're seeing studies. Do they medicate our children more? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've been on both sides. But you also have people who, when they don't face the traumas, like you're talking about traumas or mental stress, because most Black people, if they went to a therapist, probably would be diagnosed as functional depression, generalized functional depression, generalized functional, high functioning stress. But because of that, people make decisions like they self-medicate. So when we think about self-medicate, extreme dieting is self-medicating. We mostly think about drugs, you know, recreational drugs. People will self-medicate through relationships, false love, children, People would just have babies and self-medicate because they feel like they can give them what they desire or can't give to themselves. And as a result of that, sometimes, even though our kids should not get medications when they don't need it, a lot of parents will have kids and then school is a babysitter, or school is really the parent because they need time to break and rest. And they just don't desire to, like, okay, I know my child might not have like a true issue. They're really just out of hand because they've been raising themselves. But after I work and I think I need a man or I don't have a man, I just sit home and let them do anything. They can do whatever, they guide themselves. And then I'm gonna send them to school and let them do it. And then when it comes up to, we wanna do X, Y, and Z for your kid, they'll just go, okay, because in their mind, I want them to sit down too, because I want less stress as possible. There's another elephant in the room that people don't want to talk about. I've been in tons of meetings where I'll be like, so you just gonna let them medicate your child? Yeah, I come in there, I medicate them too. I get them melatonin all day. I just don't have time for that. Now, for most people, be like, oh my God, those are bad parents, or they ratchet as hell, they hood as hell, and they could be. But also outside of that, they probably don't want to deal with it because they probably are dealing with depression, no matter how beautiful they look on the outside, no matter how many times they get their hair done, their nails done, and all the kids are dressed cute. That does not mean that something on the inside is not going on. Again, that's another symptom when it comes to Black moms, especially single Black moms, that people don't really want to address because it's easier to say, these doctors are responsible for medicating my kid, but they still have to get permission from the parents, if that makes sense.
That is true.
And you'll be surprised what goes on behind closed doors when you have a mom that's like, I'm already whatever, do whatever. That helps both of us.
Yep. And most people are uneducated. Like, as somebody who's in education and mental health, like, there's been plenty of times where I've sat in meetings and like pulled the parent to the side after to tell them other things to research and explain to them what their rights are, because they take advantage of ignorance. The
absolutely.
school is trying not to have, the districts try not to have to pay, which means that if your kid truly does need extra assistance, it is easier for them to get a little bit of testing and throw them on some pills than to actually provide the least restrictive environment that they can efficiently learn in, which is what is guaranteed by the law. And so I've had to have those conversations with people about, you know, what do you have the right to demand for your child, from the school system, on the school system's dime, because otherwise they sit in there and they give them those pills, and, you know, the system knows what's right now, the system knows what's cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that brings back when we were like, don't put your whole health in the doctor's hand. Absolutely. Sometimes you need to follow those parents home too. You get what I'm saying? Because we have to do all of it. So absolutely, you can tell them their lies and they'll fight to the death of it to get their kids stuff. And some parents really want it. Like, they really want it. But there's some parents like, oh, you told me that, I'm gonna fight for it. And then they get home and it's like, it's not one-sided. Like, it's, you know, not saying that all parents do that, but just like in a general collective, though, that is a symptom a lot from moms who are stressed. And truth be told, you didn't really want those many kids, or you didn't want a kid, but your kid was a result of you self-medicating for something that you need. Because again, you know, we're talking about mental health in the Black community. The first thing that people think, they don't think about a therapist. You pray, or you figure it out on your own and get it out the mud. It's getting better recently.
I've been trying to train. So the center that I run, we deal with kids with severe mental health issues. I told you about half of my kids are on the spectrum, but I've got kids with, you know, schizoaffective. I've got kids with really severe ADHD. I've got kids with really severe depression who have, you know, tried to commit suicide and stuff like that. So I deal with like severe stuff, and I'm in the process of trying to train my assistant, because ultimately I want to step down. I want her to take over so I can pursue other interests. But I was kind of talking to her about, my methods of communication. And it was funny because I said it out loud to her, and that's what made it resonate with me. I was like, the parents that we're dealing with right now, keep in mind, all of our kids are here because their parents have good lawyers. And whenever I said it out loud, I stopped for a moment and I was like, yep, that's really why they're all here. Every single one of my kids has a lawyer that I communicate with regularly. But a bunch of it is because the parents knew their kids' right to have an environment like what we provide on the school's dime. But if you don't know that you can push for your kid to have, a flexible environment, to have one-on-one instruction, to have, trained certified behavior aides, to receive, counseling from a certified professional on a weekly basis, and the school can pay for all of this, you don't know to fight for it.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100% with that.
So it's interesting. It is interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it's a combo. So like we're reading this book and it's about health. I do believe that sometimes those kids or parents, we're talking about adults, yes, sometimes you need to change your diet. Yes, you should be the most healthy as possible for your physical body. Yes, you should take the more holistic approach if you don't have to have pharmaceutical intervention. But yes, you should be at your optimal health as a human being in your physical body. But what I notice a lot of times is that even though, we call it in the medical field patient-centered, I just call it person-centered. You will have a team of people and they say they work together, but they pretty much just pass off notes, but it's really not always patient-centered and we work together. So say like with your kids and they have their lawyers and you're fighting for them with their care. Maybe they do need to look at something, more physical. Can the nutritionist or the primary doctor and the therapist and the lawyer or whoever that's on their team, can they come together and have one meeting together and talk and assess like what's best for this person and know that all the bases are covered? That doesn't usually happen, but it is important, especially when it comes to Black people, because there's so many layers that you have to address for this whole being in order for them to thrive in our society. That's just my little take on it. I'm team be healthy all the time, but I'm also team, okay, you're changing this, but does that even affect your body? I think you brought up the food sensitivity. There are a lot of food sensitivities, but again, a lot of us is not 100% pure African. So what may affect this person may not necessarily affect you. And are you doing the best? Well, how we call it treatment, but are you doing the best diet or the best health plan for you as possible? And then addressing these other issues in order to, to be at the best health level possible for yourself.
Yep. And as much as I would like to promote therapy, I suggest that you get someone who is knowledgeable, because we have talked about, the trauma in the Black community and how it is often overlooked or underlooked or undervalued. I'm currently in like my supervision sessions and we meet weekly. And so there are white, Black, and Hispanic therapists on our call. Oh, and an Asian. I forgot we have an Asian on there too now. But it's always interesting to see the types of questions that are fielded, because the point of supervision is for us to confidentially, like we don't use names or anything, but we discuss clients and situations that we are dealing with our clients to figure out what are the best processes to meet their needs. And it is always interesting whenever like our white clients will have situations that they'll bring up that they've encountered with their patient. And they're like, I'm torn, especially if they're children clients. So like, is this a DHR report or is this something we just need to discuss? And so it is interesting and eye-opening to have those kind of conversations, because those are the things that we're not taught. Like our cultural competency classes in my master's program, we took one course. And yeah, and we're expected to know, if you have not lived anything, we're still expected to know, how do we best meet the needs of this community? And I think that we need more of that. So if you are seeking a therapist, please make sure your therapist is culturally competent, because the same way that medically speaking, everything doesn't work for Black people in the Black community because our bodies respond differently. The same thing goes for mental health. There are things that a therapist has been trained to teach you that will not necessarily work for you.
That's interesting. Only one course. But I'm not shocked, because it requires you having to study. I think I brought this up on the last call. People get mad at me all the time. You went to school and you don't be looking at statistics. That's why I don't look at statistics, because usually if they study us in a very small group, they always pick the most, poverty-stricken, high illnesses, high stress, whatever. They go to the most rural area possible, a small control group. And then they say that's what happens to all Black people. But again, like I said, this author is white. You have to take it with a fine grain of salt, when you get the information, because chances are when we read this information, it's not for us. Some of it might benefit us, but it's written from the point of a Caucasian's experience, Caucasian DNA, their genetic makeup, and things of that nature. And I agree with you. You have to have somebody who is competent. And sometimes competency is just, you're Black. So everybody who goes to school is not necessarily someone who's Black from poverty, but you should be connected to someone and say, okay, I know how people live. And I can apply that to what's going on right now, because I can understand, I can give compassion, I know what these struggles are, and I know what they need, and be able to speak up. Because like, even with me, we'll talk about therapy and we'll talk about health and nutrition. I have a friend right now, she's a holistic health and wellness practitioner. She teaches all of these things, but then we'll forget to say that, oh, it's okay because I lived it too. Like for me, I'm like, therapy's okay, I go to therapy. I put my daughter in therapy. And people go, what? You don't believe in God? Absolutely. But we go to therapy because I want her to be the best version of herself. Therapy is not always you're depressed. Sometimes therapy is you need to have self-discovery and self-awareness, and you need to talk it out with someone who's unbiased but understands you. And that's a big one too. Like if you're going to be a health and wellness expert or a personal trainer to get people's body healthy, you just don't have to just look fine. You have to be able to say, I did it because, this is what I was dealing with. I do it every day to change this. This is why I keep it a habit. This is why I did it for other people. And what I teach them might not necessarily be for me, but this is why it's important. Like for me, I teach people about self-care. Absolutely, I'm going to work on my mental health because I want to be able to go in the world and don't be triggered by things that won't even matter tomorrow to me, or it doesn't even align with what I'm trying to build. So I won't let it hinder me by keeping me stuck because a thing is a thing. I think that's also something that we have to really just look at. We're talking about health advocate. You go to the doctor, I'm an advocate. I'm going to tell everybody in my family. I'm going to, tell anybody I talk to when they talk about their health, how to be their own advocate, how to listen to your body, how to trust yourself, how to not accept everything the doctor says if it's not right. I don't care how many people you got to go through to get results. The more and more you set that example, the more and more people start to resist, and the more and more that the others will begin to take us serious and then change the dynamics and start to study more. Our people will enter more into the research so they can share, because we have to be honest, if it's dominated by white people, even if you resist, if a lot of us don't get in there and become the researchers too and show proof, you'll just be talking and it might be 5 generations before you see any progress. So, yeah.
Whoop, I'm so glad you jumped on, Monique, because I ain't have to talk no more. You and Jasmine carried the last leg of the conversation.
You're so crazy.
Oh, for real, because I came on, I was like, yeah, so I wasn't planning on facilitating, but since we're here.
Anyway, you got a lot to say because, you know, you bring the environmental part.
Girl.
That's important too. Because, I mean, even like when Jasmine brings up, you know, when we talk about health, or when Jasmine brings up like she's fighting for her kids, you know, I think we talked about this way before the book when I was like, where you live matters.
Mm-hmm.
Where you live matters. And you have to look outside of what they look like sometimes. Just because they look like you don't mean they're fighting for you.
Right.
Where you live matters. Who you vote for matters.
Yep.
Showing up to the school or wherever, it matters. That affects your overall physical health too.
I know I jumped in real late, but I just woke up and I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
Oh, team like all the way.
Right, just always come with the comedic relief.
It's true. I'm sorry. I woke up and I was like, gosh, it's one. It's already almost 1:30, and then I was like, let me just jump in and let y'all know I wasn't trying to do this on purpose.
No, it's allowed because you know the time changed this morning, so.
That's right. Yeah. But I was just up to the butt crack at like 8:30 because I napped until 4. I don't know what happened. Anyway,
we were talking earlier, and me and Alan were talking about it. That's the crap they need to do away with. Damn daylight savings time is just
I thought they voted for it to be permanent. No,
it's got to pass, but I think we should just keep doing it because
I don't think we should. I think we should just we the only idiots that still think that this should be a thing. Like, why? Let's come into modern times and leave that caveman stuff back.
Well, if the country holded it, yeah, but like just being that, I don't want to be that one state out there and we still, I just can't. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, just used to it.
We should just revolt and everybody just keep the time and just show up at work.
Pretty much.
And then
because I was like, didn't they make it permanent? They like savings permanent, but I guess it's got to go through the house, or did it go through the house?
I gotta check. I gotta double check, but I know they introduced it though.
I know last week it passed in the state, but I think it has to go to the house to keep it permanent for daylight savings. But yeah.
Talk about health issues. Sleep deprivation and all this
but
other crap that comes on with
1 hour. Really? Like it don't really make a difference to me because it's an hour. And when that Republican guy said one of the issues was safety, like, and I was like, how? And I was reading it, he was like, yeah, because
even though it's an hour for our bodies, it's a lot. It really is.
Yeah, an hour, it affects your safety, it affects your body.
Well, he was saying that
cellularly affecting you producing vitamin D, especially for Black people, because we're not in the sun as much when you're in standard time. It affects a lot of things.
I'm confused though because this technically, okay, so springing forward technically gives us that sun time we need because
it gives you something, because really you're not even designed to wake up by an alarm clock. You're designed to wake up by your natural nature's clock. Rhythm. And we fight against it a lot. So you're already fighting against your body by the standard time or the daylight. But with daylight savings, not only does your brain recognize that, oh, it's light outside, I'm supposed to be up, but you also get exposure to the sun because we all should be sunbathing. So our bodies can heal and create vitamin D and calcium and all those good things. And then that's when most people are moving their bodies around, enjoying family. It's just that we're so used to still being slaves and hand clocks.
Right.
And then getting off and rushing. But it's actually better to be on daylight savings than standard.
Yeah, they just need to stop. We're talking about they just need to stop damn switching it back and forth.
Yeah. Can you imagine night shift when I used to be a nurse? And then it went back. I'd be like, I'm gonna work 13 hours tonight.
Right.
Well, technically you don't, right? Because it just missed an hour. Oh wait, when it went forward. Wait a minute. I'm confused again. I don't know.
She was talking about losing an hour, so you technically would be working 13 instead of 12.
You be sitting there tired, like, oh, I'm gonna get off of work soon, and then that clock goes. Wait, what?
Okay, well, let's bring it back. Got you.
Yeah, we're gonna do this hour one more time.
I know, right? Feel like you're in the twilight zone. Like, forget all this. I'm walking off the clock.
But see, they used to always work to my benefit when I was baking because I was like, oh, I got an extra hour to bake this bread. So yeah, so I was like, wait. But yeah, I get you. That is tiring. Well, I guess we'll see if it'll pass.
And I was gonna say, I know we're about to end the call, but I know we had this white version of this book from a white perspective. But have you ever heard of The Cooking Gene? I think that book came out like 3-4 years ago. He's a Black culinary historian, and he wrote a book based on the foods that our ancestors ate during the 16, 17, 1800s while they were in the South on the plantation. Yoshunda?
No, I hadn't heard it, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's called The Cooking Gene. That is if you guys want to add it to the list, but I think that would be a great book to add because then you can follow up with this and see what the comparison is between interesting and then this view. I just wanted to put it out there before I forgot.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I voted for the girl with the louding voice. So but I figured we had to give DeAndre a chance because he would always recommend 50 million different books. So this is the one that ended up getting through. I didn't want him to feel like he was being left out. So, but yeah, I definitely look up that one.
I've been listening to it on audio, so I think I'm forward. I might be a little bit more ahead than y'all because I've been really listening to it on audio and not really say what chapter we're in. But it would be nice, like if people do have a copy of the book and you take notes and then do read it from a Black perspective and take notes just so it can give you a little bit more self-awareness of how the world interacts with you or perceive you and what's best for you. Because that kind of helps you to discover and redefine and restructure like exactly what you need and how you need to be getting it from certain people and how you can demand or request how to get it. Because, medical school, nursing school, all of those specialties, they're still going to teach what they teach. And so even though you might have someone who comes up and they might be what we call a rebel and they think outside the box, they're still probably going to look for information that is still based on a population that doesn't have a comparable study for us. And to kind of just be aware of those things. I think that would be important.
I agree. I'm looking at it now.
Me too.
Yeah, The Cooking Gene.
Interesting.
Looks like interesting.
Yeah, I'm downloading this one now.
And this one is more so telling you about our journey through food, correct, in the South.
Yeah, food in the South and slavery. He tours. He has a center in DC, I believe, or Maryland. He works at one of the universities, but you can go visit, and he lives like our ancestors. He puts on the clothes. He cooks their meals. He talk about how and why and what they ate and how they could do it and how it affected them. And there's some things that we have been conditioned to think now that wasn't necessarily true because they really didn't have access to the things that people told us they did. And that's why we're unhealthy. When it really was, sometimes we weren't even eating it. To say that was unhealthy, we were just preparing. It's a lot of great information. He goes into depth, but he lives, breathes, and studies these things, and he teaches it. At least you know it's from someone who he's Black. It's from the Black perspective, and not only is from a Black perspective, but it's also from a Black person who admitted that he didn't think that stuff was important, and he didn't need to know, and he got his stuff back together. And realized, oh, I was being ignorant. And now I need to teach the correct things.
Yeah, I'm reading up on him now. It says he's an African American Jewish writer and culinary historian. Interesting.
And he was like none of those things. I can't remember what he originally went to school for, but he was kind of one of those people like, oh, I'm triggered, or why do I have to know about that? Those were my ancestors. And then he got into it and realized